Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Today's webinar is UN CEFACT, What You Need to Know. I'm your host, Tom Poland, the Director of Professional Services at Acumen. Today's session, I'm just going to put up the agenda briefly here. I'm going to go through some introductions of myself and the company. We're going to talk about, I don't know, the 5 W's. What's UN CEFACT XML? How's it used? What action do you need to take, if any? How you can get your schedule ready for UN CEFACT and the new IPMR DID, limitations to consider in the format, and the most exciting part for me of today's session is the demonstration, where I'm going to not only demonstrate a free way that you can convert your schedules to UN CEFACT, but some other free capabilities to quality check your schedule, and I'd be remiss if I didn't show off some of Acumen's product contributions to this as well. So let me talk about the company a little bit. Acumen, you can see proven project analytics, and for me, analytics is really the term that captures it best. Acumen's been around for several years now, squarely in the analytics space, and has now added schedule acceleration and schedule risk management to that as well. You can see here we're focused on project management software. Another key word is insight. It goes along very well with analytics and improving planning accuracy and reliability. We truly believe that project success requires a sound plan. When I say sound plan, that's a really big phrase, and that means a lot of different things. And we try to equip our customers with all the tools and resources needed to take an initial plan and you convert it, if you will, to a sound plan. It's not an easy process. We have what we call our S1 to S5 maturity model, where you take your plan from a regular plan to a sound plan. There's a ton of information on S1 to S5 on our website. In fact, I'll be showing off our website in a little while for a different reason. And recently, with the release of our risk tool, we can say forecast accuracy requires risk consideration, and we've given you the capabilities to be able to take risk into account. I'll be showing a little bit of that as well. Some exciting and recent recognition that Acumen's received: Planning Innovation of the Year for 2012, and one of Inc. 500 fastest growing companies. We're very excited about that. In terms of our legacy here, 25 years of thought leadership squarely in project management and project analytics. And you can see on the right-hand side, we've put in a very small subset of some of the Fortune 500 and industry leaders that we do business with on a daily basis. A little bit about myself. I've been in the project analytics, program control industry since 1995. And since 2003, I've been in the federal government space, which is very relevant to UN CEFACT and what we're talking about today, because it is a new way that federal contractors are being asked to package their information. Okay, so here's the big question. What is UN CEFACT XML? Some keywords here is it's a data scheme, communication, standardized communication, using a standardized data content framework. Let me put that in simpler English. This is a file format, and it's a file format that different tools information can be converted into. We all use file formats every day. I'm using a PowerPoint file format right now. The goal with UN CEFACT is to take information from all the different proprietary tools and converting the information into a common language. This is a big deal for government especially, because one thing we all like when it comes to government is efficiency. And by allowing the government to work with standardized file formats, we're able to get more efficient as contractors, and the government's able to operate more efficiently. I'll be talking about that more when we get to some of the key points. So let's get back to a couple of the basics here. UN CEFACT goes hand in hand with what we call the IPMR DID, Integrated Program Management Report, Data Item Description, and I give you the DID number there. In fact, take a note of that or take a screenshot if you haven't seen it. Although I'll be showing you the website where this information is housed, if you Google that that DID number with the full text there, the DIMGMT 81861, it'll come up right away on your search engine screen. In fact, I tested that just before the webinar today to make sure that that's a true statement, and as of right now, it is. So that'll help you get more information. Okay. What's UNCFACT for? Well, I talked a little bit that it serves the government, but it serves us as contractors as well. The government is building what's called the EVM Central Repository. At a very simplistic level, this houses program performance data and provides access to for the government for a number of contractor programs. In other words, to get information into that central repository, it all needs to come in to the central repository in a consistent format. So rather than build the central repository in a way where it can communicate with all sorts of program management tools, including ones that haven't been invented yet, the government turned the situation around, and they've put this format out there to the industry and said, those contractors who are required to participate in this process will use this format, and the tool vendors have risen to the occasion and converted many of their tools to be compatible with the UNCFACT data formats. So we give you a representation there, a very simple representation on the right side of the screen. You've got the program data really coming in from a number of different sources into the central repository in a consistent format, that consistent format being the UNCFACT format. What does this do for the government? This allows a tool-independent information analysis for them. They don't need to maintain copies of all these different tools, and there's hundreds if you add them all up. They don't need to maintain copies of all these different tools on their workstations. All they need to do is, once the information is in the central repository, load their client for the central repository and be able to deal with and analyze information regardless of the source of the information. There's some overall benefits. I've touched on a couple of these briefly. The assurance that government oversight is consistent and accurate. This is important for everyone. This isn't just important for the government, it's not just important for the contractors. When I was producing CPR reports and sending schedules to my government customers every month, I wanted above all the information that I was outputting to be clearly understood by the agency who was taking that information as an input. As we all know, communication does not always go smoothly, even when the person broadcasting the information feels that they're being very articulate and communicating the right information. And what I learned very quickly working federal government contracts was the information that I was communicating was not always the information that was understood by the government agency or the government program manager. So the UNCFACT XML format really is effectively a communication equalizer. If I work at company A and also companies B, C, E, F, and G are contributing to the same project or to a similar project, the government has the assurance that the information is coming in consistently regardless of the tools that are being used. And I have the assurance that my information is being treated with the same importance and the same weight as those other contractors, some of which I might be competing against. What does this mean? This means the government can operate more efficiently, and contractors, this is a benefit because now that we have this universal language of communicating, my choice of tool set becomes less important. I don't feel the pressure to have the same tool set as maybe my prime contractor or my subcontractors, and I also don't feel any pressure from a government agency mandating which tools that I use because of UNCFACT. I have a method and a file format that I can use to communicate with them that's independent of the tools that I'm using. So those tools that I feel have a great differentiator compared to the other tools, I can feel free to use them as long as they comply with the UNCFACT file format. By de-emphasizing what tool set I use, automatically the emphasis becomes information quality. We're no longer dealing with the semantics of how I've configured the scheduling and cost tool that I'm using. We're dealing with the real information in a common format that everyone can understand, from subcontractor to myself to prime contractor to government. Okay, let's talk about where you can get started. If you're not already familiar with the new DID and this IPMR implementation guide, I suggest reading those right after this broadcast. If you are familiar with them, there's been some updates, and this IPMR implementation guide is also fairly new. I'm actually going to be pulling the website up on the screen, the government website that has this information. So again, either one of those terms, though, you can Google them and it'll come right up on the screen. That's actually how I get to them. The next step is to evaluate your current tools and your policies. You've got to ask yourself, and you might have to ask your vendor, is your current tool set compatible with the UNCFACT format? I'll tell you this, if you're currently doing cost reimbursable projects greater than 20 million in budget and you plan to do more, you will need a tool set that's compatible with the UNCFACT format. I'm also going to be showing you a free way that we've got you covered from a schedule perspective. Now the next question, and this one's a little more, can be a little more involved, is how will UNCFACT and the IPMR DID impact your company policies and procedures? Now, I'd love to give you the answer for this, but in order to do that, I would have to look at every single company policy and procedure. That's why I say up here, get familiar with the DID itself and the implementation guide. Look at your existing weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual processes, and make sure that you'll be able to comply with the information that is in the DID. Let me, if you haven't looked at it, let me give you some comfort. It is at a distance, it's similar to the previous CPR DID. You may already be doing many of the things in 81861, but this is an opportunity with the new DID to review it item by item and really to review your processes with respect to those items, which frankly is a reasonable exercise to conduct, you know, every year or every few years anyway. So it's a good opportunity to look at the maturity of your internal processes and tune them if needed. Big question, very common question that I've heard in a number of different forums. What about my existing projects? Is there anything that I need to do? I'll tell you right away, by default, the new requirements don't apply retroactively. The contract still prevails. However, like I said, many contractors who are currently doing business with the government, cost reimbursable over 20 million, want to continue to do business with the government and win new contracts. New contracts will need to comply. My understanding is the new IPMR DID and UNCFACT requirement are already being applied to new contracts. There is the possibility that existing contracts that you have can be modified by the government where they will need to comply with the new requirements. I can't give you general guidance on this, but I can say, you know, if you're working a project now and it is set to experience maybe a very significant mod, a multi-million-dollar modification, it is entirely possible that the reporting for that modification, CLIN, if you will require the IPMR DID and the UNCFACT format compliance. Let's talk about schedule. And schedule is one of our top areas of focus at Acumen. The schedule submittal is the format 6, and you'll see that as you review that IPMR did. You're required to do two things, in fact. You're both required to provide the CEFACT XML format, and at least for the current time and for the foreseeable future, you will also be required to provide the schedule in its native file format as well. So it's not simply enough to send the XML file. You really do need to send both. And I want to emphasize one key point. I'm going to emphasize this in a few different ways during this broadcast, especially as we get to the demonstration. Don't confuse compliance with CEFACT and creating a perfect CEFACT file with the overall quality of your schedule. Now, to many that might sound like common sense, and it is, but the one thing I want to make sure of as this new IPMR DID proliferates is that we don't spend all of our time focusing on data schemas and formats, and we remember that what ultimately all of this comes down to is quality information that's ready to be analyzed and hopefully scores and performs very well during the analysis process. In layman's terms, I can take an awful schedule, convert it to CEFACT, send it to my government customer. I can ask them, hey, was my CEFACT file properly formatted? Does it meet the data scheme? Their answer could very well be yes, but the information in your schedule is horrible. And dare I say that they'll be more willing and equipped to make that statement because now they're dealing with a common data format which gives you parity across all contractors with how they're submitting their data as well. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a new emphasis, and that emphasis is on the quality of the information now that everyone's using the same file format to send the information. I'm going to talk briefly about some limitations with the CEFACT format. It's a new format. This is very new. It's been developed over the past couple of years, and now it's gone into effect late last year. Let's call these opportunities for growth with the format. There is a change control board that meets, I think, weekly or bi-weekly with the regarding the format, where opportunities for improvement are discussed. I'm on that forum, and many of the tool vendors are. So be assured that it's entirely possible that the vendors that provide the tools that you use are actively participating in this community and working together with the other vendors and with the government to address some of these limitations. First, the format natively doesn't support multi-project structures. Multi-project structures are something that I've seen used more and more. The popular scheduling tools support multi-project structures. Government is asking industry with the way that they are sending contracts out for bid. They're encouraging team members, different companies to become team members and work together, and that often results in large, sometimes complex multi-project structures. CEFACT, by its nature right now, is oriented towards single projects. So I see an opportunity for growth in the format there. With regard to risk data, one of the key elements, and this might surprise some people, it may not surprise others, there's a requirement in that IPMR DID for an SRA, known as a schedule risk analysis. There's no support to maintain that information in the CEFACT format, either the risk inputs or the risk outputs, yet it's a required exercise. So this is an area where I feel that the data schema hasn't quite caught up to the process yet, but I expect to see improvements in this area. The third one is kind of general and really unavoidable by virtue of the fact that CEFACT is a fairly new format. Vendors may certainly interpret the schema differently. In fact, interpretation of the schema is one of the top items of discussion in those change control board, forum, down to the data element level. What does this WBS field mean? What does this join field mean? What does this cross-reference field mean? What data would a vendor typically put in those fields? Those are all open areas of discussion. It's a natural process, and I expect over time the understanding is going to improve, and we'll be able to use the word common format across any tool, any vendor, any contractor. One final item, this is down in the weeds a little bit, but it's pretty important. The way durations are stored in CEFACT right now is they're not stored in a base unit. One popular scheduling tool, MS Project, although you see the duration on the screen in days, it's actually storing the information in units of minutes and then massaging how you see it on screen based on your preference. The way durations work in CEFACT today is they're not based on a base unit. So although many of us do use days in our scheduling tool, it's entirely possible we might be in an industry that's driven by hours or even minutes, and comparing different projects against each other using the CEFACT format, it's not immediately apparent what the base unit for the durations are. Okay, one thing I talked about, let me kind of introduce this next part a little bit, is ways to ensure schedule quality. Like I mentioned before, simply being able to comply with the CEFACT format doesn't mean that you have a quality schedule when it comes down to it. Acumen has a product called Fuse, and I'm going to do a brief overview, but I'm also going to show you a method using our website that you can use with any project just by going to the website to see where you fall in terms of schedule quality. So let's see, I got to do some switching here. Bear with me a moment. And what I've done is I've loaded an MS project file called Initial Plan. It's got about 65 activities in it. You can see some of the different tools that I can use to pull in schedules and information into Fuse. And I'm going to go right for this diagnostics screen. And I see a lot of red, so already I'm panicked. Let me give you the landscape here. I've pulled up the DCMA 14-point assessment, which I guarantee they'll be running on your CEFACT submitted schedules. You can see I have many other tabs here as well. So for me, the DCMA 14-point is just a starting point. To be straight and honest, I've failed many of the checks, and you can see that very easily because there's red on the screen. I can see which year I didn't do so well on those checks, and I'm at the top level. I can break this down by control account manager. I can go lower on the WBS to see where these problems really are. Right now, I'm just looking at the top line level. I have an overall score of 14%. The reason I mention all of this is I don't want you, if you have the 14% score and this much red, I don't want you to send the CEFACT file yet. I want you to use a diagnostics tool to understand where your problems are and fix as many of those as possible before the CEFACT file gets sent to your customer. So what I'm able to do in Fuse here is, this is good information because I can see where I'm not doing well. But what I can also do is I can click on any of these items, like these 7 items here that have excessively high float, and I can see them by ID and description over here in the lower right-hand corner. In fact, if I scroll over, I can see a lot of information regarding the activity. Also, I can do that up here at the top level and see where I'm meeting or missing on the different criteria. Now, to me, this is just the starting point, because this helps me at the top level, but if I'm not doing well on leads and lags, I might want to know more about the logic that's behind the construct of my schedule. So now I have a screen up where I'm drilling in to specifically my logic items, missing predecessors, missing successors, the types of relationships that I've used, start to finish predecessors, none of those good, because I don't like those. I've never met a scheduler who has. Merge hotspots, where I have a bunch of tasks, all predecessors to a single task. I've got one of those. This would be a high-risk activity because it has an excessive number of predecessors. I also have a very helpful listing here called schedule quality. Missing logic. This is one, as someone who's spent a lot of time as a scheduler, I take to heart. I only want to have one missing link at the beginning of my project on the start milestone, won't have a predecessor, and my finish milestone won't have a successor. I don't want any more than 2 items under missing logic, and I have 11. Now, by clicking here, I can see exactly which those 11 are. Project start, that's good, I expect that. But these other ones that don't say project start or project finish, I've got some work to do, and I want to take care of those before I send this file over to the government. Now, what does take care of it mean? It doesn't mean just go into my scheduling tool and start making some connections. It means going through the management exercise with the control account manager or other responsible individual and linking the tasks in a way that make logical sense. Characteristic, duration related items. So when I use this, I don't have a set way that I go through these screens. I'll be honest with you, I follow the red. So if I see that I have logic issues, I see what they are, and then my next stop is the logic tab, so I can drill into it deeper. But as I mentioned and as I started, on federal contracts, I start with the 14-point assessment because I know that's the first way that I'm going to be measured with regard to schedule. Another term we talked about is risk, and there is a requirement in the IPMR DID for schedule risk assessment, schedule risk analysis. I know it's one of the two. SRA, let's call it that. There is a requirement for that. And what that means is the government wants your schedule, but they want a schedule that's taken risk into account in a couple of different ways. Sending a very high-risk schedule that I haven't performed a risk assessment on to the government is not going to help anyone. It might comply with the desire and the requirement to send them a schedule, but if I send a schedule that can't back up what I'm working on and the risks associated with what I'm working on, it's not worth very much. And the quality piece that we talked about, the information quality, is very low. So with Acumen Risk, we give you a solution for that, to do a risk assessment on your schedule, A, which is required, and B, is a good thing to do before you create that CEFACT file. We give you an easy way to do it, too. To talk about probabilistic risk, I have sliders. And you can see as I move this slider, there's a little heading right above my slider that says aggressive, very aggressive, realistic, conservative, very conservative. I can assess either at the summary level or at the detailed level exactly what amount of risk I think I've got associated with the task at hand. If I move this over to the right a little bit, what it's actually doing is it's adjusting my minimum, most likely, and maximum durations for the task. Because our ultimate goal here is to run a Monte Carlo simulation and see how well our finish date is going to stack up compared to the risk that we have that we're loading into the schedule. In fact, we're loading this risk right now. So I'll move some of these sliders around, and then I can run my Monte Carlo simulation. And I think it's going to give me some bad news because I've moved some of these sliders out to the right. When I've moved them to the right, I'm telling the system that we've planned these activities very aggressively. In fact, This chart's nice, and I like spending a lot of time with this chart, but my eyes go right here after I run the Monte Carlo simulation. Deterministic finish date, 0% chance. What this means is I've moved these sliders in a fashion where the project is actually planned too aggressively to meet the March 8th target completion date. Now, the system doesn't just leave me with that. It's going to give me some probabilities of what dates it thinks I can finish on. It thinks I have a 50% chance of finishing mid-May, 75% chance of finishing late May, and 100% chance of finishing in June. This is good information, and it might just give me the motivation to go back and revise my schedule or sit down with management and see if we can bring more certainty around the original durations that we had in the schedule. So I basically have two choices. I can move my schedule, or I can find creative solutions with management to be able to move these sliders to a more conservative state. Now that I've made them more conservative, if I run the Monte Carlo simulation again, this deterministic date may very well go up from 0%. Now, the other part of risk is the risk register. You can see I've got that on screen here. I'll give it a little more real estate. I have about 24 risks that I've loaded into the system, and I've assigned a probability and then an impact possibility for each risk. In fact, the system has used that information to give me a score. And believe it or not, red is a bad score, green is an okay score, and yellow is kind of in the middle. By mapping these risks to different activities in the schedule, I'm creating an association between them. These activities will now be impacted by the probability and impact of the risks that I'm associating them with. Now, I don't have time today to sit and do Monte Carlo simulation after Monte Carlo simulation, but I'll tell you this. The more risks that I map to activities, the worse I'm going to be able to comply with that March deterministic finish date of my schedule. Now, I can certainly mitigate risk, and I've got a way to do that as well. I've got a way to tell Acumen Risk that risks are actively being mitigated. I can describe the mitigation, and I can create a risk profile for the mitigation. Therefore, as I'm burning down risk, I can continue to run my simulation and see if my situation is improving. I recommend at least several iterations of that exercise every month before creating the CEFACT file. Otherwise, I'm writing that check that can't be cashed. Like we talked about earlier, I'm setting a high-risk schedule with no mitigation in place. Once I've gone through that exercise, using the tool, I can actually build a risk-adjusted schedule, and I can export that back to my scheduling tool. In other words, if we're diligent about the risk exercise and we believe we've accounted for everything and we don't think we can reduce that risk profile anymore, we can write the resulting schedule back to the scheduling tool, review it either in Fuse or in the scheduling tool, then create the CEFACT file and send it to our customer. Okay. I'm going to switch over to our website where I can do a 100% free conversion and schedule assessment of my project schedule. You can see here, I'll stop scrolling around a little bit. I'll actually show you the site here. Here's our Acumen website. It's at projectacumen.com. We'll remind you of that link at the end of the webinar. And let's see. Okay, good. I've gone full screen here. We've got great stuff out here, and one of the best, newest things that we have out here is a revised version of our schedule index calculator that also includes the critical CEFACT file converter. I can go here and I can browse to an MS project file or a Primavera XER file, and It's uploading the project, it's doing an analysis. It's not just doing a conversion, but it's actually going to give me qualitative information back about my schedule. And kind of like a cooking show here, that's going to take about a minute or less, but I've already done this beforehand. So I came back, you can see I've got the same schedule there. It has a Fuse index score of 37 out of 100. The percentile ranking is 22nd. That's not terrific. And the success probability of my project is 24%. This looks a lot like my high school grades right here. Not very good, needs improvement. But once I've done that, I can go two directions. If I'm happy with that and I'm ready to send my schedule over to my customer, I can click right here and it's going to convert my schedule to the CEFACT XML format. In fact, it's just like clicking a download link on any website. If I click here, it's going to start downloading the file. Or where I really want to go first with this project is the summary report. If you remember earlier, in Fuse, one of our products, I showed you some red, yellow, green quality statistics of my schedule. I get a few of those, not all of them, but I get about 8 or 9 of those right here on the website. I get the missing logic result. I get logic density, how many critical activities, how many hard constraints that I've used. That's one of those 14-point assessment checks. Negative float, insufficient detail, use of lags and leads. These are also 14-point assessment checks, and and merge hotspots. So using the calculator accessible on the website, I not only can convert to the CEFACT format, but I can get some top level and I can get some detailed level insight into the construct and quality of my project schedule. And again, that's something you can do free of charge right on our website. In fact, we have a report on our website right next to the calculator, right in context here, that talks about how our clients have used these tools and used Fuse to overall improve the quality of our schedule. In fact, this isn't just clip art here. This is an actual trend chart that we go into more detail in the report on that shows you from the launch of our Acumen Cloud product to today how we've seen the industry improve schedule quality. It's quite a fascinating read, and the way that this information is collected in real time by users of Acumen Cloud, I don't know of any other research study that's been performed in real time. The only ones that I've been exposed to are just compiled on retroactive data on completed projects. This is compiled based on living projects, and it's quite an interesting read. Okay, we've looked at the summary information. We can see I didn't score very well, and we've got some opportunities for improvement here. Oh, and since I have the browser open, there's one other thing. I mentioned this earlier. This is the site that houses, and you can see the address right up here. Write it down, take a screenshot. We're going to provide all these slides as well on our website. You can see here, boom, the new PMR did. There's also an awesome section called Guidance and References. This is where I go when I need to look anything up. Earned Value Management Systems, Performance, Oversight, and Governance Guidance. Information about DCMA, the Earned Value, what's called the Earned Value MIG, the Management Implementation Guide. Standard Surveillance Instruction. If you're a contractor under joint surveillance with the government, this is the surveillance instructions that DCMA uses when they come in to audit your process. Information about DAU, university, other government guidance, all great resources. Here down at the bottom is the IPMR implementation guide, extremely helpful document. And actually I can see here they have an over-target baseline and over-target schedule guide. Hopefully you'll never need that, but if you do, it's right here as well. So this page alone is a tremendous resource. Of course, accessed here. The link is up here, and always good news and everything going on here on the left-hand column. Okay, so let's go back over here. see, we talked about I'll put in one last plug for our free schedule converter here. I don't need to talk much about this because I've already shown you the capabilities of the converter. Just to kind of wrap it up before we look at questions. By the way, if you haven't asked a question, you can, I meant to mention this in the beginning, but you can use the chat function in the GoToWebinar control panel to ask any questions that you do have. And I'll also be showing you in another slide how to follow up with us in email to ask any questions that you have. I'll be happy to address any number of questions that come in from the viewers of the webinar. And in fact, right towards the end here, I'm going to check the questions area and see if there's any that I can answer in real time here. Things to do, review the IPMR DID. I've said it a few different times. If you're doing government contracts greater than 20 million, cost reimbursable, or you plan on doing so, this is mandatory reading. Assess the capabilities that you have today to support CEFACT, both from the tools perspective and from the process and capabilities perspective. Along those same lines, do yourself a favor, leverage what's out there now, like the free converter on our website. And of course, learn more about schedule, quality, and risk at our website, which is exactly the site that I had up on the screen a few minutes ago. And before I get to questions here, here's some ways that you can reach out to us and find more information. We're on Twitter. We've got our email address here as well. You can get a trial of the software that I showed off earlier, both the diagnostics software, the risk software, and schedule acceleration software we call 360 as well. Let me go ahead and see what questions have come in. Let's see. Bear with me 1 second. One question is, will we be posting the slides? The answer is yes. Just right here on our website, we'll be posting those. Next question I have is, which software packages currently support the CEFACT format? Rather than me try to rattle off all the different software packages, and when it comes down to it, there's dozens. Check with your tool vendor. I'll tell you this, the likelihood is very high that the vendor that you're working with, if their tool is oriented towards federal government contractors, the likelihood is very high that they're already supporting the format, or that they are working with that today. The Microsoft Project and Primavera users can use the free converter that is available on our website. That's, you know, those two tools are certainly not everything that's out there, but in the defense industry especially, they're two of the more popular scheduling tools that I've used. And I'll tell you this, for my participation on the change control board for CEFACT, the participants who are alongside me on that call are more or less a who's who of the different cost and schedule vendors that are available. The questions come in, when will Microsoft Project support CEFACT submission? My answer is I'm not sure. I don't want to represent Microsoft's roadmap, but I will say the schedule that I used for the demonstration was a Microsoft Project file, and I'm able to use the free converter on our website to convert any Microsoft Project file. Another question has come in from James. It was my understanding that the government's definition of CEFACT was not final. Is it? It is final for now. It's under change control, though. So like I said, the vendors are on that call weekly, but the way they're moving forward right now is they want to let the format soak for a while. It's not under rapid change control. It's under measured change control. They want the vendors to work towards what is out there now. there's a wiki that they have that goes over the changes. Sorry, I don't have the link on the screen, but it's not hard to Google it and find the wiki on that. Contact us if you are looking for more information, and I can send you some links. So very good questions, and I think I've got all the ones that have come in real time covered. Thanks everyone. Please, write to us if you have any questions. Follow up on our website. Try the free converter. It certainly can't hurt just to give it a try. And if you do decide that you want to go a step further into the insight and quality into your schedule, give our software trial a shot, where you can do many of the same things that I did on the screen today during the demonstration. In fact, you can do all the same things that I did during the demonstration today. So looking at the statistics here, we had great participation today. Thank you, everyone. It was my pleasure to help share this information with you. And check out those government resources that I put up on the screen. Check out our website and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.